The wind cut through the empty streets of Mitchell, South Dakota like a knife. Snow fell in slow, silent flurries, piling up along the cracked sidewalks and the tired porch steps of a small, faded house on East 7th Avenue. Inside, the smell of burnt toast lingered in the kitchen, and a woman stood quietly by the window, holding a mug of cheap coffee that had long gone cold. Her name was Emily May. She was 34 years old, born and raised in this very town, and at that moment, she weighed 316 pounds. She had grown used to silence, used to shrinking in her own home. Her husband, Brent, made sure of that. He was a man who had once promised to protect her, to build a life rooted in love and shared values. But over the years, those promises had rotted into insults, sideways glances, and cold shoulders. "Can't even see the TV around you?" he said one night, not looking up from his recliner. "Try moving a bit to the left, Mount Emily." It wasn't even the worst thing he'd said that week. She had laughed softly at first, like she always did. A little chuckle to diffuse the tension, to avoid the sting. But it never helped. He kept going. It was never just about her weight. It was about her clothes, her voice, the way she breathed, her value, her worth. And lately he had started doing it in front of others. At church, during Sunday potluck, he'd slap her hand away from the dessert table and say, "Lord knows you've had enough prosperity for one lifetime." The room would go quiet. People would pretend they hadn't heard. Emily would smile politely, pretending she hadn't either. Inside, though, she was cracking. That December, something finally shattered. It was the night of their 10th wedding anniversary. She had spent the entire day cooking Brent's favorite meal, country fried steak with gravy, mashed potatoes with extra butter, and pecan pie. She'd even put on makeup, fixed her hair, and slipped into the red dress she hadn't worn since her cousin's wedding 4 years ago. When Brent walked in the door, late and smelling like beer, he didn't say a word. He glanced at the table, scoffed, and muttered, "This what you call romance now? Feels more like a Last Supper." Then he looked her up and down. "Christ, Emily, you should be paying rent for 2. That night she cried in the shower until her fingers pruned, and when she stepped out, wrapped in a towel that barely fit around her body, she didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. Her face was bloated from tears, her skin pale, her eyes dull. But deeper than all of that, there was something new in her reflection, a flicker of rage, of grief, of hunger. Not for food, but for change, for health, for peace, for dignity, for wealth, not just in money, but in spirit, in freedom, in self-worth. She went to bed in silence, staring at the ceiling while Brent snored beside her like a machine. Her heart was pounding, but not from sadness anymore. That was the night she made the decision. She would leave this man. She would leave the life she no longer recognized. And she would lose the weight that had become a prison, not just pounds, but shame, all of it, gone. Emily May had no plan, no money, no support, no roadmap. But she had rage. And sometimes, that's more than enough to start a revolution. By the morning of December 12th, the air in Mitchell, South Dakota had grown colder than usual. A thick layer of frost coated the old Ford parked outside, and the windows in Emily May's bedroom fogged up from her breath as she stood in silence, staring at the pile of clothes on the floor. Brent had already left. No note, no kiss goodbye. Just the usual sound of his boots stomping out the door and the leftover stench of his aftershave mixed with bitterness. But Emily wasn't crying. Not this time. She took a long look in the mirror again, the same one that had witnessed her shame for years. Her skin still showed the softness of someone who had spent too long pleasing everyone but herself. Her body carried the weight of 316 pounds, but also of lost dreams, broken promises, and empty values. And just like that, she opened the closet and pulled out 2 trash bags. She started dumping. Dresses she had never worn, because Brent told her they made her look like a wrapped-up Thanksgiving ham. Shoes, he said, weren't meant for women her size. Makeup she hadn't touched since her wedding day, when she still believed in fairy tales. Each item tossed felt like a small rebellion. By noon, she had called her sister Marie, someone she hadn't spoken to in over 2 years. Their last fight was over money, something Brent made sure to use against her. But Emily dialed anyway. "Marie, it's me," she said, voice trembling. I think I'm leaving Brent." There was silence on the other end. Then Marie said, "It's about damn time." That afternoon, Emily walked to the public library, one of the few places she still felt safe, and sat at a computer. She searched for help, anything. Diet plans, gyms, local job boards. She had no savings, but she had a pulse. And for the first time in years, she felt it racing for something real. She found a small support group called Women Reclaiming Health and Power. Meetings were held every Friday night at the community center, just 2 blocks from the laundromat. She wrote the number down. That Friday, she showed up. There were 8 women in that dimly lit room. All sizes, all colors, all carrying something heavy. Some on their bodies, others in their hearts. They shared stories about disrespect, betrayal, emotional eating, and trying to rebuild their health not just for vanity, but for survival. When it was Emily's turn to speak, she hesitated. Then she said, "My name's Emily May. I've spent the last 15 years shrinking my voice, trying to be small in a world that told me I was too big. But I don't want to shrink no more. I want to grow, in spirit, in wealth, in values, and in health." The women clapped, not out of politeness, but because they knew exactly what that moment meant. From that week forward, Emily walked 3 miles every morning. The cold burned her lungs, but she kept going. She started tracking her meals, cooking real food with real intention. She drank more water, less soda. She stopped eating in front of the TV. She stopped needing Brent to tell her who she was. Weeks passed, then months. The pounds started dropping. 5, then 10, then 25. She didn't tell Brent she'd joined the group. She didn't owe him that. But one night, while folding laundry, he looked up and said, "You losing weight or something? Clothes don't look like they're fighting to stay on anymore." Emily didn't answer. She just folded another towel and smiled to herself. She knew he hadn't really noticed her in years, not when she changed her hair, not when she cried at night, not when she begged him to listen. But now that her spirit was lifting and her confidence was showing, he was starting to feel it. The shift. It was subtle, but it was happening. Slowly, she was building something money couldn't buy, power. Not over him, but over herself. And with that power came clarity. She would no longer measure her worth by anyone else's approval. Not Brent's, not society's, not even the mirror's. For the first time, Emily May was becoming rich in the things that mattered. Peace, health, freedom, and a deep, unshakable sense of self. She hadn't left Brent yet. Not physically, but emotionally? She was already gone. By mid-February, the snow in Mitchell, South Dakota had started to melt. Small patches of grass peeked through the white blanket, muddy and unsure. Emily May stood at the bus stop with a small suitcase, a duffel bag, and her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. She wasn't running away, not anymore. She was walking away. And there's a difference. She had lost nearly 35 pounds since that cold December night. Her clothes hung a bit looser. Her face had thinned ever so slightly. But the real weight she'd dropped wasn't measured in pounds. It was fear. It was silence, and she wasn't going to carry it anymore. That morning, she left Brent a note. Nothing dramatic, no long speech, just a single line written in the handwriting of a woman who finally knew her worth. You won't have Emily to humiliate anymore. No tears, no apologies. She caught a Greyhound bus headed east toward Sioux Falls. Marie had offered her the spare bedroom and a job at the diner she managed off 10th Street. It wasn't much, the pay was low, the hours were early, but it was honest work. And for Emily, it meant money she could call her own. "Make sure you smile at the customers," Marie said, handing her a pink apron on her first day. "But not too big. You're still healing." And she was. Every morning started at 6 o'clock. She'd lace up her second-hand sneakers, toss on a hoodie, and walk 2 miles before sunrise. Then she'd work double shifts at the diner, sometimes on her feet for 10 hours straight. Every step felt like she was fighting gravity. But every sweat-drenched t-shirt and sore muscle was proof of progress. On weekends, she still went to her support group, now virtually through her flip phone's crackly speaker. She'd listen to the women talk about cravings, setbacks, and how hard it was to hold on to their values in a world obsessed with image. Emily always chimed in. "I'm not doing this for beauty," she told them one night. "I'm doing it for peace, for health, for power. I'm done living small so someone else can feel big." The room fell silent. Then someone whispered, "Amen." By spring, Emily had lost 72 pounds. Her doctor was stunned. Her blood pressure had dropped. Her cholesterol was back to normal. For the first time in years, her body was catching up to her spirit. But money was still tight. She picked up side work, cleaning offices, babysitting, even sewing hems for church ladies who couldn't thread a needle if their life depended on it. Every dollar she saved felt like a step toward freedom, toward a future that didn't rely on a man's paycheck or permission. One night, while scrubbing the floor of an office building, she looked out the window and saw her reflection in the glass. Her arms were leaner, her posture straighter. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't look like a victim. She looked like a woman who had survived. The next day, a customer at the diner slid her a business card. "You've got a presence," he said. "Ever thought of working in real estate?" Emily blinked. "Me? I've only ever served pie and pancakes," he smiled. "Sometimes that's all the training you need. People trust you." She didn't throw the card away. That night, she sat on her sister's porch, holding the card in one hand and a cup of warm tea in the other. Marie came out and sat beside her. "You're thinking about it, ain't you?" Emily nodded. "I don't have a degree. I don't have experience. Hell, I don't even know the first thing about selling houses." Marie sipped her tea and said, "You've got heart, you've got hustle, and you've got values that people feel when they talk to you. That's more than most." Emily looked up at the stars, the same sky she used to cry under, praying for a way out. Now she wasn't praying for escape. She was planning her comeback. By the first week of June, the sun in South Dakota had taken its rightful place in the sky, drying the last of the spring rain from the sidewalks. Emily May stood in front of a small real estate office on South Cliff Avenue, holding that same business card from the diner, now creased and worn like her favorite jeans. The office was modest, white siding, a faded open sign, and an old bell that jingled as she pushed the door open. A middle-aged woman with silver hair looked up from the front desk. "You must be Emily," she said. "Nate told me you might come by." Emily nodded, heart pounding. "I don't got a degree, I don't have fancy clothes, but I got people skills, and I know how to work." The woman smiled. "Honey, most folks out here don't care about your resume. They care if you answer your phone and show up on time." And just like that, Emily was hired as a receptionist, part-time, answering phones, setting appointments, and making coffee. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a foot in the door. And she made it clear, I don't want to just sit behind the desk. I want to learn. I want to grow. I'm not scared of earning my way up. After hours, she stayed late, reading every file she could get her hands on. She learned how property taxes worked, what escrow meant, how credit scores could make or break a deal. She asked questions constantly, wrote down every answer, and even offered to clean the office for extra cash. By August, she had dropped 94 pounds. Her body moved differently now, lighter, quicker. Her clothes no longer swallowed her whole. She wore jeans that actually fit, and blouses that she picked out because they made her feel powerful, not because they just covered enough. Brent hadn't called, not once. But that silence didn't ache anymore. It felt like freedom. At the diner, customers started noticing. "Girl, you look different," one lady said, patting her arm. "Your skin's glowing." Emily smiled. "That's called health and peace." By September, she had saved enough money to take her real estate licensing course, online, at night, with a prepaid laptop and borrowed Wi-Fi from the library. It was tough. She was working double shifts, still walking 4 miles a day, and barely sleeping more than 5 hours a night. But she didn't stop. Because every test she passed, every new concept she understood, felt like a deposit into a life she had always dreamed of. A life of prosperity, not pain. One evening, after passing her final exam, she stood outside Marie's house with a folded piece of paper in her hand. "What's that?" Marie asked, sipping sweet tea on the porch. Emily opened it slowly, revealing her official certification. "I'm a licensed real estate agent," she said, voice trembling. "I did it." Marie jumped up and hugged her tight. "You did it, Em. You really did it." Tears fell, but they weren't the kind that came from hurt. They were the kind that came from climbing a mountain no one thought you could, not even yourself, and standing at the top without needing anyone to catch you. By the end of October, Emily had lost 120 pounds. She wasn't skinny, and she didn't want to be. What she wanted, and what she had earned, was control. She had built a new life pound by pound, dollar by dollar, lesson by lesson. And now? Now she was selling homes. Her first client was a single mom, 2 kids, working 2 jobs. The house was small, needed repairs, and sat on the edge of town. But Emily fought hard for that loan approval, called in every favor she could, and closed the deal with tears in her eyes. "This is more than a house," she told the woman. "It's a restart, and trust me, those are worth more than gold." That night, she sat in her car outside the home and stared at the porch light. She thought about the values she'd been taught: to be quiet, to stay put, to accept what you're given. And how every dollar she was making now, every ounce of prosperity she was building, was proof that those rules didn't apply to her anymore. Not since she rewrote her own. It was a Tuesday morning in early November when Emily May unlocked the door to her brand new office. Her name wasn't on the building yet, not officially, but it was coming. A brass plate had already been ordered, and within a few weeks, that small space on North Main Street would proudly read, Emily May Realty. She walked across the hardwood floors, still smelling of fresh varnish, and opened the blinds to let in the sun. South Dakota had a certain light in the fall, golden and soft, like the land itself was sighing in relief after surviving another year. Emily had survived too. Actually, no. She had thrived. By then, she had lost 136 pounds. Her doctor called her progress unbelievable. But Emily didn't care about the numbers. What mattered was how she felt. Stronger, clearer, like she was finally aligned with the life she was meant to live. She wore fitted slacks now, tailored tops, and a confidence that couldn't be bought with money. People noticed her when she walked into rooms, not because of what she used to be, but because of what she had become. Every inch of her office had been paid for in cash. No loans, no help from anyone. Just hard-earned commission checks, stacked little by little until she could afford the down payment. That office was more than a workspace. It was proof of her prosperity, the kind that grows from struggle, sacrifice, and a refusal to quit. That day, she sat at her desk and ran her fingers over a folder marked Brayfield Estate, pending. It was her biggest deal yet. A 3-bedroom, 2-bath colonial just outside the city limits, priced at over $250,000. Her client, a retired couple, had picked her over 5 other agents because, in their words, "You listen better than anyone else we met. You've got old-school values." Those words stayed with her, because that's what she built her business on, not flash or fast talk, but real trust, real service, and real care. She was rich in the ways that mattered, not just in dollars, but in respect, in peace, in purpose. That night, she met Marie for dinner at a cozy steakhouse in the center of town. They sat near the fireplace, sipping red wine and sharing a plate of garlic mashed potatoes. "You know," Marie said, cutting her steak, "you used to cry in your room when you couldn't zip up a dress. Now you're selling houses bigger than the one we grew up in." Emily smiled. "Yeah, and the funny part is, none of this was ever about looks." Marie nodded. "It was about health and dignity and getting your life back." They clinked glasses. As they ate, Emily's phone buzzed, a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. Later that night, as she locked up the office and walked to her car, she played the message. It was Brent. "Emily, hey, it's me. I heard about your business. Someone said you're doing good. Real good. I don't know what happened between us exactly. I guess I was just stupid. You probably don't want to hear from me. But I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About you, and, well, if you ever feel like talking, I'm still here." She stood in the cold, her breath visible in the night air, staring at the phone like it was a ghost from another lifetime. Brent sounded different. Or maybe he was just desperate. But Emily? She didn't feel small anymore. She didn't need validation. She didn't need revenge either. What she had now, wealth, freedom, self-respect, was bigger than anything he could ever offer. And she had earned it, on her own. Still, a small part of her wanted to know what he would say if he saw her now. The woman he used to mock, now living in a home worth more than his truck, his pride, and his broken words combined. She didn't call back. Not yet. Because Emily May was busy living the life he never believed she could have. It was late November in Mitchell, South Dakota. The kind of cold that made your bones ache and your breath feel heavy. Emily May was finishing up a showing just outside of town. A beautiful ranch-style home with a wraparound porch and a kitchen so bright it felt like summer inside. Her client, a newlywed couple, had smiled ear to ear as they imagined raising their first baby in that house. "Feels like prosperity," the woman had whispered to her husband. Emily agreed. That word meant something deeper now. It wasn't just about money, though she had finally built a cushion in her savings account that gave her peace of mind. It was about values, safety, a sense of future. She drove back into town as the sun dipped behind the plains. Her phone buzzed again. Brent. 4 calls in 1 week, 2 voicemails, 1 message from a mutual friend saying, "Hey, Brent's been asking about you." She hadn't answered any of them. That Saturday, she pulled into her driveway, a long, curved stretch of concrete leading to the white brick house she'd bought 6 weeks ago. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a fireplace, big yard, paid for mostly in cash, the kind of home people work their whole lives to afford. Her house wasn't a symbol of revenge. It was a symbol of wealth earned through perseverance, of health rebuilt with intention, of a woman who had rewritten her story with sweat, late nights, and self-respect. As she stepped onto the porch, her stomach dropped. There he was. Brent. Sitting on the bottom step, arms wrapped around his knees, coat zipped up to his chin, face red from the wind. He looked smaller somehow, older, like the world had started to press back on him. She didn't speak right away. He stood slowly. "Emily?" She crossed her arms. "You got a reason for sitting on my porch, Brent?" He shifted. "I didn't know where else to go." Emily let out a breath. "That ain't my problem anymore." I know it ain't. But I needed to say it. I messed up. I was cruel. I didn't see you. I didn't appreciate you. I didn't... "Brent," she interrupted. "You didn't just mess up. You broke me, over and over again. With your words, with your silence, with how you made me feel like I wasn't worth air." His eyes welled. "I see it now." She shook her head. "You see what I've become." "That's not the same." "I see you built something real," he said, glancing up at the house. "You got a business. You look happy, healthy, strong." Emily looked at him hard. "I am all those things, but not because of you. In spite of you." Silence. Then he said, "I've been staying in a motel near the highway. I've been thinking about every dumb thing I ever said. I just wanted maybe a chance to fix something." She let that sit. Finally, she said, "I lost 140 pounds, but the biggest weight I dropped was you. That was the real change." He nodded slowly. "I deserve that." "Yes, you do." She paused. "I'm not angry anymore, Brent. I'm just done. Done explaining myself. Done shrinking. Done trying to be less so someone else can feel more." He looked down at the ground. "Would it be okay if I just sat for a bit? Outside? I ain't asking for nothing. I just feel like I owe it to myself to see what real looks like." Emily stepped back, opened her front door, and turned. "You can sit on the porch. For tonight, that's it." Then she closed the door behind her. Inside, her home was warm, glowing with soft light. Photos on the wall, fresh flowers on the table, peace in the air. She didn't feel like a woman who had been left behind. She felt like a woman who had built everything with her own 2 hands. A woman who had claimed her health, her wealth, her peace, her power. And outside? The man who broke her was sitting in the cold, staring at the life he once threw away. By the first week of December, the first snow had already settled in Mitchell. The rooftops were dusted white, the trees bare and brittle, and holiday lights blinked softly in the distance. Emily May stood at her kitchen island, slicing apples for a pie she was baking for the church fundraiser. Gospel music played low in the background, and the smell of cinnamon filled the air. There was peace in her routine now, not the fake kind she used to force, but the kind that came from knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. She had just set the pie in the oven when the doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, she could see him. Brent. Again. She opened the door halfway. "I told you one night, Brent." "I know," he said, hands shoved in his coat pockets. "And I'm not asking to come in. I wrote something. Been working on it for a while. Just wanted you to have it." He handed her a folded letter. His hands were shaking, from cold or nerves she couldn't tell. She took it, slowly. "That's all," he said. "I'll go now." He turned and walked back down the steps, disappearing into the pale, white quiet. Emily closed the door, set the letter on the counter, and stared at it for a long while. Part of her didn't want to open it. What could he possibly say now that would matter? But curiosity has a pulse of its own. She unfolded the paper. Emily, I don't know how to fix what I broke, and I know I probably never will. You were never the problem. I was. I see that now. I see how I used my own self-hate to try and keep you small. You were always good. You were loyal. You were strong. I just didn't want to see it because it made me face what I wasn't. I didn't deserve your kindness. I didn't deserve your love. I see you now. And I hope you know, you didn't just lose the weight. You found yourself. And you shine so damn bright. I almost don't recognize you. I hope you forgive me someday. But if you don't, I understand. Brent. She read it twice. Then she folded it back up and tucked it into a drawer. Not because she wanted to keep it, but because she needed to remember exactly what she had survived. Later that evening, she walked into her office, her name now shining gold on the door, and sat behind her desk with a cup of tea. She opened her laptop and checked the numbers. She had just closed her 12th sale of the quarter. The business was thriving. She was making real money. Her portfolio was growing. She was planning to invest in her first rental property come spring. It was more than just profit. It was wealth. Not just financial, but emotional. A deep-rooted richness that no one could take from her again. The next morning, she drove by Brent's old house, the place they used to live. The porch was falling apart. Paint chipped, lawn overgrown. A car with a busted headlight sat crooked in the drive. He was still in there, still stuck. And she'd moved on in every way possible. She rolled down the window, let the cold air bite her cheeks, and whispered to herself, "Thank you for showing me who I never want to be again." Back home, she pulled out an old photo, one from nearly 2 years ago. Her at her heaviest, fake smiling at a church potluck, Brent behind her with a smirk that stung even now. She stared at it. Then, without flinching, she ripped it straight down the middle. Not in anger, in closure. Because this wasn't revenge, this was release. Emily May didn't need to get even. She had already won. It was Christmas morning in South Dakota. The streets were still, dusted with a light snowfall that shimmered under the pale winter sun. Emily May stood in the doorway of her new listing, a modern farmhouse just outside of town, warm lights glowing through the windows, wreath on the door, and a wooden sign out front that read, "Sold." She had closed the deal the night before. It was her 14th home of the year, 14 families, 14 fresh starts. And for Emily, that number meant more than just commission. It was proof that she hadn't just survived. She had risen, from broken to whole, from invisible to powerful, from dismissed to respected. She slid her gloves off and unlocked her car. Her planner sat open on the passenger seat. Every page filled. Appointments, closings, goals. There was even a scribbled note at the bottom. Client from church potluck asking for help. Remember to lead with values. Emily never stopped leading with values. That's what made her different. What made her trusted. In a world where people chased money, she chased purpose, and prosperity followed. By now, she had lost a total of 140 pounds. Not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every layer that had once been weighed down by years of shame, guilt, and self-doubt. She didn't just change her shape, she changed her life. That afternoon, she joined Marie at the community center for the holiday lunch. The same place she once showed up, broken, just looking for someone to understand. Now, she was sponsoring half the event. She brought food, gift cards, and stood at the door hugging women she didn't even know yet, because she remembered exactly how they felt. "Emily," a young woman whispered, "I watched your story online. I was where you were. I'm still there, maybe. but you give me hope." Emily smiled, warm and honest. "Honey, if you knew how many times I wanted to quit, but I didn't, and neither will you. Start with health. Everything else will follow." Later that night, back home in her kitchen, she lit a candle and sat at the table alone, not lonely, just reflective. Then a knock on the door. She knew who it was before she even opened it. Brent stood there, hat in hand, eyes low. "I ain't here to bother you," he said. I heard what you've built, and I had to see it. You did good, Emily." "I did great," she said. "Without you." He nodded, quiet. "I don't expect anything," he said. "I just want you to know, I regret it. All of it. And I see now, the woman you were back then, and the woman you are now, she was always in there. I just didn't want to see it." She stepped outside and pulled the door closed behind her, the cold air brushing her cheeks. "You know," she said softly, "I used to dream about this moment, about you showing up, begging, regretting, and now that it's here, I feel nothing. Not hate, not revenge, just peace." He swallowed hard. "That's fair." "You taught me what I never want again," she said, "and for that, I thank you." He turned to leave, but paused. "You look rich, Emily." She smiled, tilting her head. "I am, in every way." That night, Emily stood by her window, watching the snow fall. The lights inside her home glowed steady and warm. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. She had built a life of substance, of health, of prosperity, of values. And as the year came to a close, so did a chapter of her life that no longer defined her. This was more than a comeback. It was a homecoming. The woman who once hid behind silence now stood tall in her truth, proud, whole, and unshakably free. And you? Have you ever lived something like that? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story.